welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health Live, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
I'm your co-host, Susanna Alter.
And we are in a car, so hopefully the sound and video is good for you on Facebook and Instagram. We're in Carbondale, Colorado, Susanna and I, and we are tuning in to talk about stress because, well, even though we're in this beautiful place, we're feeling a little stressed, and we thought let's bring it to the surface. Let's expose ourselves, maybe for the betterment of the planet.
Yeah.
So,
because who can relate?
Who can relate to stress? It's funny because I do find myself in times being stressed that I'm stressed. It's like I feel these feelings, and then I make it, and then I make it wrong that I'm feeling these feelings, and then that just like compounds the issue, and then it just magnifies and intensifies and gets more and more uncomfortable. And then before I know it, I'm in like a nervous breakdown or on the brink of one. So if you can relate and you're tuning in, I don't know who you are out there, but give me a thumbs up or something. Ellen can relate. And how about you, Susanna? What are you stressed about these days?
Well, I'm stressed. We're here in Colorado because we are wanting to move here. And we've been house hunting this entire week. And there's just been so many thoughts in my head like, oh, should we do this? Should we do this? But I want that, but I don't know if we can do that. And it's just like, oh my God, what do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the overwhelm I'm feeling. And I go in and out of it. But that's the overwhelm that I'm feeling right now. And what would you recommend, Ben, if you see your partner in a state of stress?
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's either Susanna or it's me. Most of the time it's me, but every once in a while Susanna will slip in or slip into stress or slip out of her center and into stress. And gosh, it does help so much to have somebody from the outside to just hold that space for someone else to be stressed, to be anxious, to be feeling whatever, and just making it okay. Mm-hmm. Because I have such a hard time when I am in it or out of it. I forget what we're doing. When I'm stressed, mm-hmm. or when I'm depressed, or when I'm anxious, I have such a hard time considering not feeling that way. And when there's someone in a neutral space who can just hold me and make me feel, make it okay and not make it more wrong, because I'm the one that's making it wrong. So if they can help me not make it so wrong, then it really does help.
Yeah, well, because what I'm experiencing right now as I'm in stress is this need to figure it out. Like, okay, I'm going to sit down and we're going to work all this out, figure out everything we need to figure out to make this decision because I feel like I need to make this decision right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, where's the urgency?
Yeah, what it feels like, in these moments, I'm realizing what it feels like. It's really going against the universe. It's going against the flow. Mm-hmm. Because the flow is not with us. We are fighting it, and we feel that. And that's the nature of, I'm realizing that is the nature of where these feelings come from when we're not in the flow, but we want to be in the flow, and we try to force ourselves into the flow. So yeah, it is a gift to hold space and deeply know the answer will be revealed. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's because, everything is revealed in what we like to call divine timing, mm-hmm. or, which is so beyond our control of trying to figure things out, trying to work things out, trying to make it our way when we really don't know what is the ultimate way. We're ultimately getting in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we've felt ourselves just in the last day getting in our way.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm trying to get Susanna out of her way, she's trying to get me out of my way. But when it comes down to it, we have to get out of our own way.
Mm-hmm. I really love this quote from one of our favorite people, Sydney Banks, where it goes a little something like this. The answers that are difficult come from thought. The answers that are easy and simple come from wisdom. And and that quote may be a little bit off, but that's the essence. And what it's really saying is, when we try to figure out what is in the highest good for us with our thinking mind, with our intellect, it's usually really difficult. And ultimately, whatever we decide to do with that intellect will be fine, but the process of doing so can be stressful, like how I'm experiencing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we've all probably experienced a time when, just like that, knowing comes and wisdom comes and the answer is so clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think often it's really hard to trust that the answers will come in time, because I feel impatient.
And yet, ultimately, we all have direct access to the flow of the infinite wisdom, the infinite potential, the answers that we're all seeking. We all have direct access at any given moment. And when we're not connected with that, or when we don't feel our connection with it, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it just means that we are, we're firing up our intellect. We're thinking about things. We're trying to rationalize and override the flow of wisdom, the flow of inspiration, the flow of infinite potential.
Mm-hmm.
And just remembering, which is the most difficult part at times, but just remembering that we do have conscious ability to turn this on and off, this kind of override, and to be with it on, to be with our intellect running the show is totally okay, because if we didn't have our intellect, then we wouldn't be able to drive this car here today. It's like we are being served with these different aspects of intellect and wisdom, and it's just a matter of knowing which space we're operating in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And anything else about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's just important for me to remember right now in this moment of stress is that, oftentimes uncertainty and not knowing is just so uncomfortable. But the more comfortable I can become with a state of unknowing, it's like, oh my gosh, is that not being in the flow? Just like really surrendering to not knowing, and just trusting that everything is going to work out in the end, and that it is, that right now in the moment it is ultimately okay as well.
Yeah.
And that we are okay.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to also talk today, what's coming to me is obviously this is a podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram, but this is also going to be on the podcast that's focused on holistic health, the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health and well-being. And it's like, why are we talking about stress? Well, because stress is really at the root of pretty much every physical health condition. And I wanted to talk about how that is and why that is. And just, I've found it helpful, and I've, in my experience working with people, it seems to be very helpful to have this awareness of how our mental, emotional state affects our physical health and well-being on a moment-to-moment basis. And it really comes down to psychoneuroimmunology or neuroendocrinology, these fancy words that tie our psychology to our endocrinology, which is our hormonal system, the hormones that serve as messengers throughout the body, pretty much dictating every chemicals, messaging system, and every physiological pathway that we have is triggered by hormones in the body. And these are also intimately connected with our immune function and whether our immune function is activated or suppressed. And I just, find it amazing that all of what we're talking about, all of these pathways and interconnectedness is all shifting and morphing on a moment-to-moment basis. And I don't know about you guys, but I have really felt the activation of, a stress response in my body, like, profoundly. And I've also felt profound activation of a relaxation response. And sometimes those, the stress response is triggered by, almost getting in a car accident or something like that. But sometimes the stress response is just triggered by something that someone says, or, someone looking at me in some way, and it, stresses me out. And similarly, the relaxation response, sometimes I can feel it when I'm, meditating or, consciously choosing to go in that space. And sometimes I feel it when I'm just, walking in the woods and I don't even think about it. So it's amazing that we can have some amount of choosing into our state of stress or relaxation, and yet our environment or these situations that we're in also can kind of nudge us or push us in different situations. And the fact of the matter is, we can't always live in a perfect bubble that's in like a quote-unquote relaxed state. It's impossible, and that only feeds our addiction to control our external environment, to make everything perfect and safe and just but when it comes down to it, we're actually never really safe, and yet we can drop into a feeling of being at peace and being safe within, even if we're not, like, quote unquote, in a, I don't know, the world is not a safe world. Mm-hmm. There's things happening, and that's okay, and we can still be relaxed and safe on the inside, even in a crazy world.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about being safe in this crazy world is that because we are always connected with wisdom and a deep inner knowing, we will always know how to respond to any given stressful situation that we find ourselves in. We hear amazing stories about people being held up at gunpoint that just drop into a space and know how to respond in a loving way that protects themselves. And it's my response to that is, how did you know how to do that? And the way they describe it is just
beyond intellect.
Yeah.
Beyond a knowing.
Yeah.
Or beyond a, rational knowing. It's a deep knowing that we all are always connected with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So stress. Back to how stress affects the body in all these ways. You guys are probably familiar with the HPA or HPA axis, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and that's the main system pathway where our stress response is triggered. It happens in the hypothalamus of the brain, and it goes to the pituitary, and then our adrenals are our the endocrine glands that really master and control the way our physiology relates in a stressful environment. And our adrenals kick out all these hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol, amongst so many other things that the adrenals are important for. But yeah, the adrenals can be turned on, and in kind of a constant chronic state of being turned on, even if we're in a peaceful environment. So, and the way that the adrenals get turned on is from the brain, the psyche, or I don't know, I guess the brain is different than the psyche, but it happens in the brain, and our psychology, in these neuro pathways influence how the hypothalamus turns on the stream of hormones that ultimately affect our physiology, and some of the adrenaline responses are, an increased heart rate, constricted pupils, and, dilated airways and blood vessels. And essentially what the stress response is doing is it is activating our system in a way that we can physically respond and be resilient and, fight and survive and breathe deeply and get our oxygen, get our, the blood sugar to our cells, and all of these kind of things.
Yeah, and a lot of people,
Survival.
a lot of health experts now are talking about this field of stress management or stress reduction, and all these practices that one can do to kind of tone down their nervous system. And a lot of those tools are really great and are really powerful, and I love them. However, I also want to say that what's really important about when we think about okay, how do we minimize the negative impacts of stress on our body, I think about not so much getting stressed out about the stress, like how we were talking about in the beginning, because it can be very easy for us to just say, oh my gosh, I know I'm stressed, okay, I'm gonna do everything I can to not be stressed, or I'm gonna do everything I can to figure out the situation so that I'm not feeling stress anymore. And sometimes I feel like that approach backfires a little bit, because we get so attached to figuring out the issue, or doing everything we can to avoid the feeling of being stressed, that it actually keeps us in the stress longer than we would be if we just let the stress pass through us.
Yeah, we get stressed out about stress. That's the there's always, if there's a right way to manage stress, we got to reduce it. It's stressful managing the stress.
It can be stressful managing
stress.
And if we see it just kind of as a wave of thoughts, like a thought storm of stressful thoughts, or just like a wave of stressful emotion that comes and we feel it and it goes.
Yeah.
Just trusting that no matter what is going on in our external world, we are always connected with this source of well-being and peace inside of us, and it's going to shine through when that storm passes. That for me has been really helpful, and I feel as though taking that approach and understanding how the system works has opened up a lot more time for me to just reside in more peace.
Yeah. Essentially, what I hear you saying, Susanna, is not making the feeling of stress or the stress response in the body mean anything.
Yeah.
Just allowing it to be a natural kind of rhythm. And then, because that, I'm realizing it's just coming to me that, I talk a lot about how the body is inherently able to be resilient and deal with all of the physical, stimuli that we're exposed to on a daily, moment-to-moment basis. And we react, and then we respond, and then we calm down. We react and we calm down. We react and we calm down. And that's healthy. That's a state of health. But when it becomes an issue, or when it can become, can develop into something chronic, on a physical or mental, emotional health issue, it's when we react and then we stay reacted, or we
react to the reaction.
Yeah. And then we don't allow ourselves to come back into a state of well-being, which is our, inherent kind of status quo, or it should be.
It is.
And I have a hard time saying it should be, because if you're not in a state of well-being, or you're not connected to that, that's okay too, but it's important to remember that that is the natural state of being in a calm, connected, wise, accessing the wisdom, accessing the infinite potential that we are. That's our natural place. Mm-hmm. So I guess the takeaway that I see as Susanna's dazing off into the mountains.
No, I'm just realizing that, I started off this talk feeling overwhelmed and stressed. And in this moment, I don't feel that. And nothing else changed in my external world. Like, we still are house hunting and don't know where we're going to live, but right now I feel good.
Yeah, and then, in 5 minutes she might not feel good.
Exactly.
And 5 minutes later, maybe she'll feel good again, maybe she won't. But yeah, these stress cycles are normal and healthy, and don't hide from stress. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I just want to remind you, that you already know, is that you have the capacity to deal with stress in a really profoundly graceful and resilient way. And it doesn't require that you learn any new techniques or anything like that. It doesn't require any sort of breathing, although sometimes that does help. It doesn't require any sort of diet, although sometimes that does help. It doesn't require any sort of meditation or visualization, although sometimes those kind of things help. But those are just, optional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
On that note, anything else?
On that note, we're going to go do some yoga. No, just kidding.
Well, we are.
Because our friend is teaching a class.
We're going to go hop in a yoga class with a friend in Carbondale.
But not because we're stressed.
Well.
Because we want to.
Maybe we are stressed and maybe we're going to do yoga, but the yoga is not the cure to the stress.
Yes.
The yoga is just a way to connect and enjoy and feel our bodies and move our bodies.
Yeah. And
I'm just reminded to remind you that if you are seeking support in your kind of stress resilience in your physical world, we love talking with people and helping people to figure out their innate connection with their well-being. And if you haven't kind of gleaned it through this conversation, how you are with stress in your body and in your life is such an important way when it comes. It's such an important thing to focus on when it comes to any, achieving any sort of physical health goals. It's really hard to get there when stress is a constant hurdle. So figuring out ways to optimize the relationship with stress is really key when it comes to achieving health on all levels. And on that note, we love you and we look forward to seeing you next time. And peace and love. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye-bye.